Welcome back. I'm Kim Fulyana. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec. Today we want to explore a little bit about achieving your personal best. And this was triggered by a result that happened to one of our previous guests. In fact, we've had Krystle Hockley and Josh Hockley on the podcast a couple of times, initially talking to us about how they focused their lives and changed their lives from full-time employment with both of them to a combination of types of employment so that they could pursue their sport, which was triathlon. And then more recently, at our 100th episode, they were back to join us in a panel, and they talked then about an upcoming World Championships at which Krystle was going to compete. And that has happened now. And she has a very excellent race report that is good for all of us to read and to understand about setting personal goals, about not competing against everybody else that turns up on the day, but about running and swimming and riding a bike against the goals that you have set for yourself. We will put a link to that race report of Krystle's at the end of the post. And there'll also be a link to a race report from Josh, because we can't leave Josh out. Josh has decided that rather than triathlon, he's going to focus on ultra running. He's quite mad.
In a good way.
He'll be happy for us to say that. When he looks at us and says he could train us and we think we don't do running, Josh, this is just not us. But he loves to run. Ultra running is a true test of mind over body. And so I encourage you also to have a look at the race report from Josh. Both of these people are young. Now, when we look at their working career, their lives, they've got pretty much everything ahead of them. And they've made some big decisions already in their lives. They've made some big changes in their lives, and they've focused very clearly on what they want to do, what they want to achieve. And they review that all the time. They look at it and they change it, and they talk to one another about it, all of which you would have heard in our previous conversation with them. What Fulyana and I wanted to do today was to look at how that relates to us 30, 40 years further on in our careers and our experiences. And do we all know that I don't set that goal thing. I don't do those. I do targets. I don't do goals.
She says it now. Yeah.
But, should we take a leaf out of their book? Can we learn from these people? And I think we can, and I think it's important. And I know that the feedback we've had from all of you who listen is that you really do appreciate having that range of people in their careers and their activities, so that you can all think about what does their information mean to me. So we thought we would do that exercise ourselves today, and we would think, well, what does this information that comes from Krystle and Josh and the way they set their targets, not their goals.
Goals.
What does that mean for us? How should we be taking on their information and looking at what we're doing?
I definitely believe we can learn from them. And if you look at how they do it, and when you look at most athletes, is they're competing against themselves. So personal best is the measurement and how they progress from there. What it means is they understand themselves, they understand how their mind works, they understand how their body works. This should be no different to any of us working in any field. We've got to understand how we operate and how we continuously improve. The second thing is, of course, they would learn from others and be inspired by others. They might be others in their field or outside their field. Of course, we can do that in our corporate lives as well and in our private lives. The most important thing is not to become a copy of someone else. I think it's learning and adapting things to make it relevant to you and focused on how you can improve. So when Kim says we don't run, she's right, but we run in a different way, if you like. The word run doesn't come in my vocabulary, but I know what motivates me and how to push myself to improve myself in different things. And I believe every person is capable of that, and I think every person does that, but some are more disciplined than others. The ones that are disciplined end up benefiting more, which is what I'm learning from the athletes, and that is You're disciplined, you measure, you continue to measure. So you reward yourself, you become happy with your performance, and that gets better and better. But when you just drift, you think somebody else is doing better, you kind of don't give yourself the reward and recognition and the motivation to excel.
We are not, I don't think, shown how to set measures for ourselves. We are encouraged to find role models. We're encouraged, if we look at sport, we're encouraged to look at what is the current best score, the best result, the fastest time, the longest distance, whatever it is that relates to the sport itself. We're always looking at those external values, and we're taught to look at those external values are the measure of success. And we're not shown that within that measure of success, there are lots of little measures of success that relate specifically to our performance. And I think that's probably something that's lacking in terms of training and development for people in business, regardless of what business you're in, is that we look to the external target to measure our success. And we need to start developing ways to set for ourselves our own targets. And this is what you'll see in the race reports, that both Krystle and Josh set targets, and they set targets for the next hour, for the next kilometre. You know, they're not, this race, I'll do it in this way. They're not big, they're not long term, they're immediate. And so for us, when you're working, it would be, you know, if we look at doing these podcasts, we set ourselves targets. So we'll say in the session that we've got, so say we've got a couple of hours, we'll try and record 5 or 6 episodes. So that's already a target that we've set ourselves. And sometimes we do that, and sometimes Fulyana talks too much, and we
never.
And I can't stop her.
That's true.
I know. And that people find this intriguing, that I can get her to do some things, but I can't get her to stop talking. That's just how it is. That's just how it is. I understand the family situation. I know that she had to do that to survive, so that's just how it happens. But let's look at how we can personally and individually set small targets, but targets that make sense, that will reward us when we reach them. So if we use that analogy of the running or the competing, the triathletes will say, at this kilometre mark, I want my heart rate to be this, I want to be doing this, or feel like my pace is this, you know. I read it and a lot of it just glosses over because it's far too technical about the running for me, and I don't want to understand that particularly. But they're little goals, but they're measurable. And so we come back to these things being measurable, being achievable or attainable, and being specific. It's that SMART targets, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-driven.
The bit that I like the most of all of that is that it is this example of the 1 hour running. It's definitely can be applied to our daily achievements or goals for the day. So we have a diary, we have meetings scheduled, but I think to get to that granular part where you just sit there and say, at this meeting, my aim is to, even if you don't get the targets that you might have the outcome, I'm looking for this outcome, but you might even talk about your own performance. Yes. Whether we get the outcome or not, I want to know that I've given it all, that I performed, and then review that and see what I could have done better. And sometimes we're not as disciplined as the athletes in doing that, and therefore we lose the opportunity to get better by acknowledging our successes, no matter how small. We tend to focus more on we didn't get the result. Yes, but within that, what did I learn? And how did I perform? And what are the takeouts? And I think if you do chunk it, let's face it, everybody is super busy and you've got multiple responsibility at home, at work and combined. And if you don't do that, you can be overwhelmed. And you can only look at what didn't happen rather than what did happen.
And I think too that those of us who do a little bit of sport or other outside activity, apart from the work environment, we'll find that we do that in these other areas and we don't do it at work. If I take sport as an example, we might be involved. I have association with someone who's just returned to archery after a 40-year break. He is very focused about, this is what I want to achieve, these are the steps I have to take, so I have to get these arrows, I have to get these veins, I have to have the target here, and he'll do the calculations in his head of what's wrong with the arrow and where it should be and adjusting the bow and all those sorts of things. This is not a type of archery that he has done before. He's done lots of other ones and he's been in the industry, so there's a lot of basic knowledge, but it's a long time ago. Very focused on what he needs to achieve and when he needs to achieve it. Bring him into the work situation, it's scattered. He'll do his list for the day and he'll set some targets that he wants to achieve, but he gets distracted so easily, whereas with the archery, it's focus. So what we've got to do is recognise that we can do this, that we've got the skills to be focused, to be organised, to be driven, and transfer them into the task that we're doing. One of the methods that I use that I've mentioned before is the 50-20-50. So it breaks it up into a 2-hour period. So for 50 minutes you work on one thing only, no distractions, no going back and checking, or I'll get a bit more information. You just work on one thing. So if it's writing something, you just write it. You don't go back and correct the grammar. You don't go back and think of another word. You just write. For 50 minutes, the timer goes off. You put the pen down or walk away from the keyboard, whatever you're doing, and do something else for 20 minutes. And then you go back. You either go back to that task or you can go to another one. And at the end of 2 hours, suddenly you've done 2 big things and had a break or done one small thing. That it's just 2 hours. And you've achieved all of this in this 2-hour period. So it's really fulfilling to use that system.
So when planning for anything, it's plan and then measure and make sure that you measure at the small bits, bite size. And as Kim just said, when you're focused and you say, this is what I'm going to do for that 50 minutes, do it. Very rarely we have something that will definitely has to interrupt those 50 minutes. But we're so used to saying, I have interruptions. I think we invite interruptions. I think we get used to wanting to think about 20 things at once, and that's good, that's a good skill. But if you also allow yourself to focus on singular thing for short periods of time, you'll get better results.
Yeah, see, the current thinking is that multitasking is not good because you're spreading your focus over too many things rather than do one, do the next, do the next. That's an aside. We'll talk about multitasking in another podcast. We might leave personal best there. We do thank Krystle and Josh for sharing their activities and their thoughts with us and with all of you. And I encourage you, as I said, to read those 2 race reports and to follow their progress. Well, I can tell you that Krystle has now decided that she will turn professional, but she's going to still combine that with some of the conveyancing work that she does. So that's another step in their life journey that they've talked about and worked on and decided that that's going to give them some targets that they need to achieve. But for now, we'll leave it there. I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.